last month you've spent countless hours caring for your loved one. They have been sick, and you can feel every ache and pain. Every night they cry themselves asleep. In the morning you help them get up, you help them eat, you help them use the bathroom. You can see in their eyes that they're ready to go. In some ways you're ready to let them go. You finally make the difficult decision to help them on their way. The next morning you say goodbye to your beloved pet. Currently, active euthanasia is not legal in the United States. What we currently use in the United States as end of life care is palliative care, which helps control pain at the end of life. If active euthanasia was legal in the United States, it would be a way to give people with terminal illnesses more control over how the last days of their life are spent. I will start by defining active euthanasia and palliative care. First, I will start with active euthanasia, which is defined by the Dutch State Committee as the intentional ending of life by someone else than the person involved after his request. So this means that a doctor or nurse would be actually giving a lethal dosage of drugs to end a person's life. Palliative care, defined by the Center of Advanced Palliative Care, as defined, is specialized medical care for people living with serious illness. It focuses on providing relief from symptoms and stress of a serious illness. Oftentimes, during this type of care, and when a person is near their end of life, they will be put into what's called a terminal sedation. It's often used to relieve extreme pain, but not to bring the time of death sooner. So it's used as a way to help control pain during those last days. So now that you know the definition of both, we'll go over how they could be used together and how they might benefit a patient. So most patients, oftentimes during those last days, during palliative care or hospice care, will request for a nurse to give them lethal doses of narcotics to end their life. Now, in the United States, it is illegal to do this, although it does seem to happen in a non-intentional state. I lost my father when I was 21 years old. He was terminally ill and in the hospital, and ultimately in his last days, the doctors had told us that he was receiving lethal doses of morphine, and so really, while he would die of cancer, he would probably most likely be dying of cancer in conjunction with the lethal doses of morphine he was receiving to control his pain. But since they were using it as pain control at the end of his life, it is legal, and in the end, the cause of death was still considered the cancer. Patients feel that if they could control more of those last days, that those would create more positive memories for them and their loved ones. Patients have also expressed concern that they want to end their lives, and while they know that it would be illegal, that instead of being able to spend those days with those loved ones, that at times they would need to take things into their own hands and do it themselves so as to not to get their family in trouble. You may say, this sounds great for the patient, but what about that patient's family? Well, studies have been done talking to patients after losing a loved one to a terminal illness, and they've actually found that a majority of people that have watched a loved one die of terminal illness are in favor of active euthanasia. And they are in favor of it because they said that it would have given the person with the illness more control over how, again, their last days were spent, but then also how the loved one's last days were spent with that person. The end of life is not always a pleasant experience, and so therefore the families felt that had it been more controlled and under the family's terms, that those last moments together may have been more memorable and more peaceful. I've gone over the benefits to both the patients and families of what active euthanasia could offer to people at the end of life. I do think that active euthanasia could have a place in the US for end of life care for terminally ill patients. I do think that it should be used in conjunction with hospice and palliative care, but I do think that it could offer a good way for people to have more control over those last days, how they're spent, who they're spent with, and in all give everybody a more peaceful um, couple of last days with their loved ones. So let me leave you with this. As I mentioned earlier, I lost my father when I was young to cancer. He spent 2 months in the hospital waiting to die. On his last day, I was the one to enter the hospital room that morning, and he asked me to gather our family together. As most patients on their last day know that the time is near, he knew that the time was near. I gathered our family together. We were all there together, but there wasn't enough time for him to say his individual goodbyes to everybody before he was no longer able to talk and left this life altogether. Had active euthanasia been an option at that time, maybe those last days would have been different. Would he have done it? Maybe not, but at least it would have been an option had he wanted to. Thank you for your time.